Hello and welcome to Tokyo Inklings. My name is CY and you can find me on my website at tokyostationpens.com, my Instagram at tokyostationpens, or my Twitter at tokyostationmnh.
And my name is Jacob. I'm Foodafan on Instagram and on Twitter and have a blog at foodafan.com.
Super exciting, episode 24. I like it. This podcast almost has more episodes than I have years in age, so that's cool. Be a while until it catches up to you, Jacob.
It'll be a while.
Yeah. All right. So first of all, let us start this podcast by thanking the listeners. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your support. Your support is what makes this happen, and we want to recognize that. So we want to start off with reading some reviews. We haven't read reviews in a while because we've had so many other things going on, but I think it's always good to go back. So today I'm going to read two reviews. This is review from Jakey Bob via Apple Podcasts. Jakey Bob is from Great Britain, and his title is, I think this is supposed to be a fountain pen heart JP. 5 stars. One of the few podcasts I always listen to. Emphasis was on the always. As a fan of Japanese fountain pens, I really appreciate a deeper insight into a topic that can be inscrutable for outsiders. So, thank you very much, Jakey Bob. Jacob, you wanna say your words of appreciation?
That's nice. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, and that's really what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to explain what's going on in the world of Japanese pens and the market here.
Exactly. And the second review is from Andrew77 via Apple Podcasts, again, Great Britain. The title is highly informative, 5 stars. I've been listening to this podcast for quite some time now, and I thought now is the time to leave some feedback. The show is simply one of the finest podcasts on this platform. The rapport between CY and Jacob is refreshing, and I love that they both have distinct viewpoints, but do listen to each other. If you're into Japanese fountain pens and you love Japanese culture, this is a show for you. Please keep up the great work.
That's very nice. Thank you for that.
Jacob has a review phobia. So thank you so much, Andrew77. We really truly appreciate you listening. Now, for the rest of you who have written reviews for us, we're going to get to them. Don't you worry. And make us your Instagram stories. Tell a friend about us. Just put into perspective, right? I mean, the Reddit group on our fountain pens, that's grown. I think in the last 2 years, it must have grown like double of what it was at the end of 2018. We can do the same. We want to grow, we want to expand, and we need your help. We need you to tell your friends, post about it on social media. I know that a lot of you are in different fountain pen groups on Facebook. Talk about us on Reddit. All of these things help. 5 stars. Give us a review. I think, what did they call it in the industry? Rate, review, subscribe.
Yeah.
There you go. Rate, review, subscribe. Okay. Now that we've done shilling ourselves out, let's get on to the main meat of the podcast, Jacob, because we've got an exciting topic today.
Yeah.
Main topic is super exciting, but I don't know anything about it. Before we get into that, what have you been writing with? What's new?
Yeah, so we both got this new pen from Kyono Auto, right? So this is a pen by Tag, so the company behind this Kyono Auto ink brand, and they are celebrating their 5th anniversary now. And so they released this 5th anniversary pen, which is a Sailor Pro Gear called Usururi, which is this sky blue, pale blue Pro Gear with some sparkles.
Yeah. It's more purple than I thought it would be.
There's a little bit of purple there. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, but it's definitely like very pale, bluish color. It's not nuri-iro, which is lapis lazuli.
Yeah.
So that kind of confused me, but it's a very pretty pen.
But they had this explanation on the website where they talk about there's some kind of porcelain decoration technique where you first have this white base and then you paint it with sort of cobalt blue, sort of lapis lazuli kind of blue, but then on top of that you have some kind of transparent layer. And by adding that transparent layer, the blue becomes more pale, more light, and that's the color they were aiming for with this pen.
Yeah. So it's like this glazing technique, right?
Yeah.
When you glaze on ceramics, you can get this awesome bluish color.
Yeah.
I think outside of Japan they call it China blue. So it must be a very similar color to that. The pen itself is very, very cool. And I got one as well. The first and most distinct thing, I think, even outside of the colors and stuff, is that it's a ringless Sailor.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that. I've seen a Sailor Prophet without cap, and I think there was some maybe European exclusive.
European. I think there was one in the US as well, which was green.
Right. Yeah. You're right. But I've never seen a Pro Gear, I think.
And I've never seen it done in Japan.
Right.
So that's very distinctive for the local market, and it's in a pretty color.
It is, yeah.
So, what do you think about this pen?
It is definitely a pretty pen. I also think maybe now, I mean, we are getting used to Sailor pens getting more and more expensive, but for a limited edition, this one is not that expensive. I think it's like 34,000 yen plus tax, which compared to some other limited editions, it seems quite reasonable.
If you got the zoom nibs, obviously they're a bit more expensive.
Yeah.
This is an expensive pen. It's not as expensive as some other pens, but it is getting to the I can't do this every month kind of thing.
But we talked about a new Bongbox pen recently, which was like 20,000 more, and that was not
the Matador.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what game Sailor is playing at here with their price increases, but it's so hefty, and I'm not sure I'm a fan of it. Obviously, I know why they're doing it, and they're gonna keep doing it until people stop buying the pens, which I don't foresee. But I think it is quite a hefty price. I am pleased though, because I think in return for this hefty price, it's a very nice pen.
And this one seems quite popular. I just had a look a few minutes ago, and most nib options are now sold out. I think it was just M and F remaining, and I assume they have more M's and F's than any other options. But all the other ones are sold out now. And
I believe they sell overseas as well.
Yes, I'm not sure if they have done that, how long they have done that, but that was refreshing to see. I actually wrote about that a few months back when I wrote my blog post about the pen trends last year, and one of the trends I saw was that the Japanese retailers, out of necessity, started going more online and reaching out to bigger people overseas. And this is a good example of that.
Yeah.
So you can go to Tag's online store and you can even select English, right? And you can select your currency and they ship overseas.
Yeah. I think that this pen, first of all, I love that it's ringless.
Yeah.
I think it's super cool. It doesn't even look like a Sailor anymore because it's not got the ring. When I lined up with my other Pro Gears, it's totally a completely refreshing look. The part where the cap lip is, usually where there's a ring, there's a bit of a traces of the mold, right? The pen mold.
Yeah.
So it's not completely smooth.
Mm.
And that was interesting to me. I thought they would have smoothed that part out, because I just rubbed my finger across the pen and I noticed that. But I think something that's super cool that they hadn't done before was this, for tag at least, was the bird. And a lot of people love this bird.
Yeah, so this is the bird from the logo, right? It's called a hototogisu, little Japanese bird. So it's both laser engraved on the nib and it's also on the cap finial.
And I love this bird.
Yeah,
Jacob. This bird is super, super cool. What's curious to me, though, is that Tag, a few years ago, experimented with making their own fountain pens.
Yeah, I remember a few years back well, I'm not sure if it was Tag or Kyonoto, I mean, which brand they used, but I remember that
they used a Fumisome?
They've done a few. So yeah, one is the Fumisome that they had is there's some kind of leather pen.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the one I'm thinking.
But before then, I remember a few years ago now, they released a pen that was themed after some metro line in Kyoto or Osaka, I think. And the pen doesn't look that attractive, to be honest. And if you go to their online store, it's still available. I think it's been available for now over 5 years. So I guess they weren't as successful before.
So I guess they're going to do what everybody else does and just outsource it to Sailor.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Sailor.
Which is fine. Yep. Acquisitions then on my side, we're on kind of like a no-buy, right? So I got in actually just today a Kawasemi F. So we talked about the Kawasemi C before, which was the Kawasemi Century by Platinum. That's their latest model. They did a model previously, which was the Kawasemi F, and that's the Pro Gear model. I had to say this pen is really, really nice. I put some stories up already of this pen. The ends, the butts of the butt and the finial, they're this nice kind of milky turquoisey color, while the pen itself is more of like green leaning teal-ish color with sparkles. It's very, very beautiful, with a blank nib and a laser engraved 21K. My plan for this pen was to grind it and sell it with the naginata.
Let me guess, Akane wants it.
No, actually. But it's been sold.
It's been sold.
It's already been sold. So, yeah. I mean, it's a stunning pen, I have to say. And, Kobayashi always does these great releases. So, happy to have it in my possession for a while. This pen won't get the Tokyo Station Pen's treatment, but, goes to a nice home. And then on top of that, I wanted to talk about an experiment that I had, which I wrote on my blog earlier this week. So there are actually two parts to this experiment. The first part is a very happy story. I managed to make a stacked nib. So I took 2 Mont Blanc nibs and I stacked them into a cross point, an older cross point style nib. Now, Jacob, you had you were able to try it on Wednesday. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, my first thought was that you're reckless, but that's nothing new. It wrote better than I had expected, and what I mean by that is that I think you just got your welding equipment, right? Yes. And I thought that you would spend do the first 100 nibs with handwrite nibs or some Chinese steel nibs, but you went pretty much straight to the gold.
It's the first one that it's the first nib that I welded.
Yeah, and that's why I call this reckless. But Yeah, the nib writes quite well. I compared it to your cross point, which, as you said too, is a little bit sharper and it's not quite as broad.
Yeah.
But it's quite smooth and it's a thick line.
And we actually went out to Motozen afterwards, and I commented to the staff saying that the new cross points are much slimmer, much more like an architect versus the older cross points. And I said, the older cross points, they were more like naginatas, right? To which Motozen's shop staff did confirm. So I wrote an entire blog about the history of stacked nibs, how they came to be, different makers, and how I made it. So if you're interested in that, go read the blog. You can find it in the link in my bio. So that's the first part of the story. The second part of the story is that the nib had a very, very minor misalignment between the top tines and the bottom tines. So the Sailor one is really much like just a straight cross. It's super clean. And my nib was not a cross exactly. I mean, it was a cross shape, of course, but the right tine was ever so slightly more right in relation to the bottom tines than the left. So I, being an idiot, decided that I'm going to try to fix this. So I start. I open up the tines and I move the bottom tine a bit over to create a bigger gap in the bottom tine, but then it will align with the top tine. And I managed to snap off just the tine. No, not just the tine. Just the tipping of the bottom tine. So I have 1/4 of a tine, which is missing somewhere.
Oh no.
So I was very shocked. But I do have a plan to salvage it, and it might turn into something even more interesting. So keep a lookout. Okay. It might turn into something, maybe a soft stacked nib. Who knows?
Oh, that would be something new. That would be new.
So I'm on the lookout now for some platinum C nibs. Jacob, you are the Mercari master, so I depend on you. Onegaishimasu.
Sure. I'll do what I can. Yeah, they pop up every once in a while. I actually bought a few from Kingdom Note too, so that's a good place to look.
Okay, I'll go check it out. Meanwhile, we can move on to our main topic, which is a bit happier than my sad news. And the main topic of today is your report to Nagahara's clinic, which happened 2 weeks ago. Now, before we go on, I do not know anything about this visit because when I asked you, you refused to tell me. So these are my live, unfiltered reactions.
Yes. Yeah, so last time we talked about how Nagahara was going to have a nib grinding event at Bangbox in Omotesando, and I think we recorded on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And I said I would go the next day, the Sunday, which I did, and it was quite interesting. So I thought I would give a report about that. And yeah, we have met up a few times since then, but I thought that maybe it would be more interesting to get your sort of your reactions as you hear about things for the first time.
I mean, there's a lot of YouTube videos like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, that seems quite popular, especially in Japan right now. You're reacting to other people's videos. Yeah, so I went there quite early in the morning. I think I was probably the second or third person. And at first it was the usual, COVID protocol where, they check your temperature, say, yeah, I got to wear a mask, hand sanitizer. And then they had this acrylic divider that's protecting Nagahara from
your dirty germs.
Customers. Yeah, exactly. So he asked, what nib grind do you want? And I brought my Pilot Custom 743 with a coarse nib. And I said, can you turn this into a Kaiha style Naginata B?
So you didn't ask for the Omotesando blue?
I looked at the photos, but I realized that the section was green, and I don't like that, so I decided to bring my pilot instead.
All right. So Kaiha style.
Yeah, but I had one more requirement. I told him, as nice as the Naginata Togi nibs are, they usually aren't very good for reverse writing. I think that's sort of natural, side effect of that grind, that they're quite scratchy in reverse.
And did he agree?
Yeah, and I said that, can you make me a Naginata Togi that actually works in reverse? And he said, yeah, no problem, I can do that. So that was my requirements. So yeah, he started grinding, and he's quite talkative. He likes to chat while he's grinding, and he seems quite casual. He's like almost like grinding one hand while he's telling you a story. So he likes to have a conversation. So one of the first things I asked him was, why did you decide to do this nib grinding event this time? Because there was one planned just a few months ago, and you decided to cancel that.
Yep.
So what is different this time? And he said that last time, as we think reported on the podcast, it was his daughter that asked him to cancel or postpone. And apparently his daughter is some kind of medical professional, like iriokanki no shigoto.
Okay.
But this time she was okay, he said. And in his own view, last time it was still a bit more early in the pandemic. There was more uncertainty around, the virus, how to protect yourself, what is dangerous and what isn't. Yep. While in his view, we understand the virus a little bit better now. We understand better, what to do and what not to do, and how to protect yourself. And in particular, he said that as long as you don't go out, drinking in the evening, you're mostly fine. That was his view.
Okay.
which in a way is not actually that. I mean, if you look at the numbers in Japan, we talked recently about how Japan now has its second state of emergency, and and the only thing that really means is that the government is asking restaurants and bars to close around 8, so there are few people out drinking in the evening, right?
Yes.
And if you look at the numbers, at least in Tokyo, it's slowly going down again. So maybe there is some truth to Nagahara's idea.
I'm sure there's some truth, but the question is degree, right? I mean, if you have a fever and tell you to put an ice pack on it, you get, a bit better.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean you don't have a fever anymore.
Yeah.
So I see where he's coming at, because if his daughter is a medical professional who then agrees for him to go, he's relying on that source of information. I'm not saying that I agree with it, but I understand where he's coming from.
And then he also said, understandably, that he really misses this face-to-face meetings with the customers where he does the nib grind and he sees customers' reactions. So that's one reason why he really wants to do these nib grinding events again.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we talked about various things, and for example, we ended up talking about this Kaiha pens, and I said, as far as I understand, you did all the broads, and your disciples at Sailor did the M's and MFs. And he said that's not actually quite true. Yeah, I did all the broads, but I also did the majority. I think he said like 80% of the M's and MFs. So he did most of them.
So he's basically saying, if you bought a Kaiha, that's largely made by me.
Yes.
Okay.
So then I asked, what about this new pen, the Koen, this follow-up pen, who's doing the nib grinds? And he says, yeah, that's the students, my students at Sailor, they're doing that now, all the nib grinds.
He mentioned how many?
No, I didn't ask. But he also said that they are the same people who do all Sailor's new specialty nibs. So then I asked, that must mean that your students make these multi-layer or 2-layer cross points and cross musics. So then my question was, if your students are able to do 2-layer welded nibs, do you think they will be able to do a king eagle or a king cobra? And it says, yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anything stopping them from doing that.
Okay, but why not then?
Well, the question then is, whether Sailor as a company, wants to do that. But I think in terms of skills, they have what is needed to do these nibs.
So I have a point to say about this because after I created my first stack nib, so people then came and DM'd me and they said, "Well, how much?" I think is a quite a normal question, right?
Sure.
So I've come to a pricing, and the pricing is not far off what Sailor charges for the cross point. So Sailor's pricing makes sense. They're obviously making more on the nibs because I would have to buy the nibs from Sailor, whereas Sailor is probably making a profit margin off of their nibs. But if you were to do a King Eagle, then the cost would be around let me see. Would be around at least $1,200.
But just one thing about that, I would imagine that there's less of a problem for Sailor if you sort of ruin one of the nibs or a few of the nibs while working on this, because they probably have the tooling and equipment in place to repurpose the remains of that nib.
I agree. But I think the second issue is that, well, I don't know how they're doing their stack nibs because I cut the tines off of a nib. And that's how Sailor used to do their stack nibs.
Sure.
The new ones do not have an engraving, so there's no guide as to where you should cut the nibs. So I'm not sure if they're actually cutting tines off nibs or if they're making like separate little nibs, like little tines without the rest of the nib body, and then welding some tipping onto that.
I see.
So, because 3 layers adds like a lot of complexity versus 2 layers. So first of all, it would look less nice, I think, in my opinion, because then you have 3 layers, and it's kind of awkward to stack them all on top of each other. And the second thing is, like, more so than ruining the nib, I'm concerned, like, how do they plan on stacking it without guidelines? The guidelines are so helpful in stacking the nibs. Without the guidelines, I just can't imagine, like, because the second layer, right? It's relatively easy because it's close to the base.
Sure.
By the time you get to the third layer, that's pretty far away from the base.
That's true.
Then you really have to plan. And I suspect that Sailor probably uses some kind of a jig, some kind of contraption to hold.
Must be, right?
Yeah, to hold the nibs in place, because their alignment is super, super clean. It's flawless. And so they must have some kind of equipment to hold it in place. But if you do it for a 3 stack, then that equipment will change. So I don't know. But for sure they have the skill.
Given that they have done this for many years, I'm sure they have some kind of tooling for it.
I don't know if old man Nagahara had any tooling. I think he just sat at his desk, cutting away, just exactly the same way that I did, and it's kind of fun, to be honest.
But so then I asked Nagahara. I asked him before, but I asked him again. What about yourself? I'm sure people want you to do King Eagles and King Cobras. Would you consider making those nibs again? And he said, no, I won't do that. And he had a few points. One was that it's almost like a philosophical point. He doesn't think there needs to be more of those nibs. He's quite happy with the like no one making more of those nibs, and he's quite amused at the prices he sees at Yahoo auctions and so on. I think that the people who got the nibs, they got the nibs, and they should be happy.
Yeah, and then they're gonna sell it for
a lot,
100 times the price.
But then the other thing he said was that the matter of having access to nibs, and he said that to make those nibs you need a lot of tipping material, which more or less like limited to zoom nibs or coarse nibs. And then he explained that a while back, I'm not sure when it was, but when he was still working at Sailor, and another nibmeister had made a 2 or 3 layer nib from, I think, platinum or pilot nibs. And the company, must have been either platinum or pilot, noticed that, and they called Sailor to complain because they thought Nagahara made that nib.
All right.
And obviously it wasn't him at that time. He had no reason to do that because he could just use Sailor nibs because he was still an employee. But so he knows that platinum and or pilot, they don't want you to make multi-layer nibs from the coarse nibs. And I mean, other nibmeisters might not care, but maybe he wants to maintain a good relation with them. So he mentioned that as one of the reasons why he doesn't want to do multi-layer nibs.
Well, I'm very sorry to Platinum and Pilot in advance.
Yeah. So we're not going to see more of that, but maybe other nib grinders will do them instead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I had a few other things that I asked him about. So we talked before about these strange theta pens. So when Sailor celebrated its 85th anniversary, they released these theta pens with a really weird story about like brain waves. There was this Hado trend, I think, back in Japan back then, and when I did a blog post about this, and when I did research for this blog post, I found this article where someone had interviewed or talked to a Sailor sales rep, and Sailor's sales rep had said that, our theta pens have nibs that gotten special treatment by a like Hado master. So there's some kind of like spiritual enhancement to these nibs, so that when you write with them, it improves blood flow and it improves your immune defense. Right? So there's always been something weird about these theta pens. So I had to ask Nagahara, of course, as far as was there anything different about these theta nibs other than, the nib stamp? And he was like laughing, no, there was nothing to them. But then he said that these pens were not very well received. I think the phrase he used was, すごく評判悪かった.
Why? すごく評判悪かった means like the reputation was very bad.
Well, I think it was not so much because how the parents actually performed, but because of the dubious claims by Sailor about these spiritual enhancements.
Yeah.
But then he showed me, he had a theta pen himself, but it was a pen I have never seen before. So it was a theta mini, like a fat theta mini.
I've seen that.
And then it also had a metal section. So I'm not sure if this pen was ever sold or if it's some kind of Franken pen, but it looked pretty cool.
Yeah, I've seen that. Maybe it was even Nagahara's, but I've definitely seen a mini theta pen before. But not on sale. Never for sale.
So another thing I asked him about was Sailor's zoom nibs. So we end up talking about the difference between zoom nibs and a coarse nib. So I had to ask him, the zoom nibs, they have this special look to them. They look and they write a bit different from Platinum's and Pilot's coarse nibs. So what's the idea behind the zoom nibs? Why do they look the way they do? And he said, yeah, it's really just, as Sailor says, it's all about getting different kinds of line widths depending on your writing angle.
Mm-hmm.
So we already know that, but what's more interesting to me was the second thing he said, which was that the modern zoom nib, the nibs you buy today, are in his view incorrect. That's a misunderstanding. That's not what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah, y'all stupid nib workers at Sailor, y'all got it wrong.
So you remember when I showed you, I found this old 14K zoom nib, which has more of a flat-footed.
Which you're going to sell to me, right?
maybe. But that is, in his view, that's what it's supposed to look like. Okay. That is the correct zoom nib. And he said he even complained to Sailor that the new zoom nibs, you're doing them wrong. This is not how it's supposed to be. and they didn't agree, or they didn't care. And he even mentioned that as one of the reasons why he quit.
You're not doing the zoom nibs correctly, so go screw yourselves.
Well, he might not have a race quit just because of the zoom nibs, but that was like one of the examples of where he thought that Sailor doesn't really care as much as maybe they did before.
So that's interesting because I read in an interview somewhere that Nagahara Jr. did not start at Sailor as a nib grinder. He started as a salesperson. And a lot of people would assume, Nagahara Sr. trained Nagahara Jr. But from this interview that I read, actually what happened was, so he decided to switch to become a nib grinder. Probably, his father definitely did influence him, I think. But his father never gave him any guidance on how to make naginatas.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. His father handed him a nib, said, go grind a naginata. And he just had to figure it out by himself. So I guess during this period he must have studied a lot of different nibs.
I imagine that, yeah.
Yeah, and something interesting, I've been using the Wayback Machine also to research on the stack nibs. But on the Wayback Machine, on Sailor's websites, the naginatas used to be called Nagahara nibs. But now they've scrubbed all references to Nagahara nib. You can't find that anymore.
Well, we know that back in the day, the nib said nag, N-A-G, on the side. I'm not sure when they stopped doing that.
I think... No, yeah, my Crosspoint doesn't have that anymore. But I think they stopped doing that. So there are 4 distinct eras, right? There's the one with the old imprint.
Yeah.
That had nag for sure. The new imprint, which had... or the early new imprint, which had nag for sure.
Yeah.
The late new imprint, which did not have nag. So I believe that must have been in the mid-2000s. Or late 2000s. And then from early 2010s, I'm sure they were all just NM, NB, etc. And then the new imprints, which is the latest one, definitely does not, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and so another thing that he said was that when he left Sailor, there were, I'm not sure if they were Sailor employees or people from elsewhere, but there were various people who were like inspired by his decision to work as a full-time independent nib grinder and wanted to follow him, and he said he stopped them. And the reason why he did that was that in his view he wasn't sure that there was like a market for this kind of nib grinders in Japan. I mean, we talked about that before.
Yeah, that's
how
interesting.
In the US and so on, there's definitely a market for it. While in Japan, it's not as common to ask for nib grinds. So he sees himself as sort of pioneer in Japan. He's sort of creating a market, maybe for others to expand later.
Yeah, that's curious. That's very, very curious because, we've talked at length about how people don't want to grind nibs. They want chose, they want health checkup, but they don't necessarily want you to grind nibs.
Yeah.
Partly because I think they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
What did he say about that?
Yeah, he said that, I mean, the kind of services that you get in Japan are these nib tuning events at department stores and so on. So he's basically trying to make a case that, you know, you may want a different nib grind and not just, you know, an ink flow adjustment. But related to that, I think some of the earlier nib grinders, nib workers like Moriyama, for example, I think they might have done a little bit of grinding, but
yeah, he did.
But I think they have sort of a
anti-grinding.
only one item on the menu.
Yeah.
Like the one item is like personalization, chose. Like they fix your nib, and whatever they do for you might not be something they can repeat for someone else.
Yeah. I told the story about Moriyama rejecting me, right?
Yeah. So the idea that you have this a la carte menu of different nib grinds, that is what doesn't really exist in Japan, or hasn't existed until recently.
So, is his business successful? Is there a market?
I didn't ask about it. It's
Jacob,
financial sort
Jacob,
of doing, but
we need to upgrade you. We need to give you journalism training. You're leaving me hanging. Okay, we need to brush up your journalism credentials. Give me some training, and you're gonna go out and interview him again.
So another thing I asked him about was this. We talked about before, but there was a certain green platinum pen that he worked on earlier.
A few,
yes.
But this particular one is not from a retailer, right?
Right.
Okay.
And there were these various claims that these grinds were somewhat unique or different. So I asked him about those grinds and what, if anything, did you do differently with these pens? And he said nothing. So at least intentionally, he didn't do anything. So he said the only thing that's different about these pens is that you can get them with a Nagahara F, and that's not something Sailor offers, right? Other than that, it's nothing really unusual.
And I mean, I am so not surprised at this news because, you know, the person, we won't name him here because might get Mr. Nagahara in trouble, but the person is not a reliable source of accurate information on technical details. He might be reliable in terms of like news and events, you know, he knows what's going on, he knows a lot of people, but when it comes to like technical stuff, that's not who I want to ask.
That's for sure.
Okay, anything else you got from Mr. Nagahara?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I only had this 20-minute time slot, and I was struggling to write down what he told me when he kept talking. So this was what I managed to write down and remember.
That's awesome. I mean, you know, we got a lot of good information out of this event, and you know, who knows? Maybe I'll go back to one of his events next time. Maybe I'll bring a stack nib for him to grind.
So for me, I think the most interesting thing was his view on the Zoom nib, how the model ones are just wrong, and how he was like upset about it.
And you know what? Your older Zoom kind of looks like his Nagahara B, right?
Exactly. They're both flat-footed.
Yeah. And I guess that, but a little less sharp on the top.
Yeah.
And I read in an interview that, you know, he acknowledges that his Naginata are totally different from his father's. He said in the interview, my father ground nibs for people of his time. So that's like bubble era people who wanted to show off a lot of ink. It wasn't really about the effect on the paper. It wasn't really about it wasn't about how you can form the strokes. It was about how it felt on the paper, so really smooth, and how much ink could come out of them.
Yeah, I remember that. He said that in that video too, right? He
Yep.
posted this YouTube video. Yeah.
Yep. Whereas his naginatas are more like born out of the needs of his customers, right? Which is kind of funny in a way. I'm not sure if he's praising his father or praising himself.
A little bit of both.
All right. So we do have some news this week.
Yeah.
We have 3 points of news, so we won't do a Q&A this time. The first piece of news that we have is the YY Pen Club number 12.
Yeah, so these YY Pen Club pens, they always tend to be a bit on the more expensive side. And that's definitely the case here. I think they were the same price last time. I think it was like 55,000 yen last time, and it's 55,000 yen this time as well. The difference is that last time you got a Rialo. Several of the previous pens have been Rialos, piston fillers.
Yeah.
This time it's a matte black with silver trims, also matte or rhodium trims. But it's gathered, and usually these gathered pens tend to be a bit more on the expensive side, so maybe that's where the cost went.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind paying even a bit more to have a gathered Rialo.
Yeah.
If it was a gathered Rialo...
I don't think I've seen that. Does that even exist?
No, that's what I'm saying, is that if there was a gathered Rialo, I would snap that up in a heartbeat. I mean, even if it was like, $600, $650, I would buy that, because that doesn't exist. And I think, obviously a lot of people are, sparkly sailors, blah, 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 blah. In my opinion, they should make more, like, once you get to a certain level of market saturation with the sparkly stuff, you gotta go bigger. Gathered Rialo, come on, let's make it happen. 2022.
But one of the unique things about the YY pens up until fairly recently was that they used 18K nibs, and this was after Sailor stopped offering 18K nibs on their own, like regular production pens.
Yeah, but they did have them on the cross pens.
Yeah, cross, and also I think Montegrappa.
Just for one model though.
Yeah, one model. Yeah, but Sailor branded pens with 18K, that was quite a while back now. But YY Pen Club's pens were like up until like 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. This gathered model is beautiful. As usual, blank nib. My only wish was, first of all, I don't like the sandblasted trims, but that's story for another day. If they just had it in a Rialo.
It's a very small round, so they have four nib options, and there are 15 pens of each. So you got 60 pens in total.
Jacob, we need to commission a pen soon.
We should do that.
Okay.
We should do that.
Next year. All right. Next point is the new Ishimaru pen, which I ended up buying.
Oh, really?
Not for
Tell
me.
me.
Not for me. I had a request, and it actually comes, I believe, tomorrow morning, the 30th. So I'll have more on it then. I think it's always harder to tell, I think, with the 1911s. I think this is a full size.
I certainly hope so, given the price, but it's hard to say.
Yeah. I believe that this is a full price. But it's a pretty pen, I think. I like that the section is actually matte metal. I know I just said I don't like the sandblasted finishes. I think the exception is on the the grip section.
Mm.
Unfortunately, it has the sandblasted metal even on the rest of the trims, but shogunai. If it were not the fat trim, I think it would look better.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about it being difficult to tell whether it's a large or a slim pen. And we always have the same problem when we're looking at second-hand pens, and that is the main reason why I prefer to buy the older pens with older designs, right? Because if it says 1911 in big font, that's a large size nib.
Right. Yeah.
But you can't really tell with the newer nibs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I'm just not 100% sure.
And also the prices are like it's all over the place nowadays. It can be hard to tell from the price.
Yeah.
It looks good, and I like the sandblasted section. I wonder how grippy it is.
I think it'll be fairly grippy, but I'll let you know when it comes tomorrow.
Sounds good.
And then lastly, we have the new IG ink.
Yeah, so this is an Eric and Mart collaboration, and we both assumed that this was an iron gall ink made by Gary, which we talked about a lot in previous episodes. So I asked Gary I replied to that Twitter thread and I asked Gary, did you have anything to do with this? And he said no, and that was a big surprise to me.
Yeah, which leads me to the question: okay, then who is making it? And there is kind of an answer here, right?
Yeah, it sounds to me like it's not unthinkable that Mart did this. He tends to experiment with a little bit of everything, so this might be something he did. Another possibility which we discussed was Toner and Limbs, but then if that was the case, I would have expected to see more Toner and Limbs iron gall inks at once.
Yeah, I don't think it's Toner and Limbs because the packaging is not the same, right?
Mm.
And specifically, Eric on Instagram said that it's created by just them two.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see what this IG ink is like. But honestly, I'm not running out of the door for it.
I want to try it, but if it's not Gary, then I will be more hesitant to use it in a nice pen, because it probably takes skills to do a safe and good iron gall ink, and if someone has done it before, then it will probably go in a Jinhao rather than in a Mickey.
But we want him to make a nib for us. Sorry, not a nib, an ink for us. That would be cool.
That would be great. That would be great. Yeah, we should keep asking him.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it for at least from my side. Anything from your side?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right, then. In that case, I think that brings us to the end of this episode. As usual, we already said in the beginning, rate, review, subscribe, but more importantly, tell a friend, make it an Instagram story, talk about it on Reddit, talk about it on FPN, talk about it on FP Geeks. Wherever you talk about fountain pens, make sure if there are people who love Japanese fountain pens, drop them a message, say, hey, there's this podcast. It's run by these two guys who live in Tokyo, and they bring you news about Japanese pens from Tokyo on location. And that would really, really help us grow. Word of mouth is easily the best way to get the podcast out there. So we really, really rely on every single one of you to help us out. Thank you so much. My name is CY. You can find me on my website at tokyostationpens.com. You can find me on Instagram at tokyostationpens, and you can find me on Twitter at tokyostationmnh.
And my name is Jacob. I am Foodafan on Instagram and on Twitter, and have a blog at foodafan.com.
All right. See you next time. Bye-bye.